Morning settled over the human frontier colony, like a warm hand placed gently on a restless shoulder. Light spilled through the workshop windows, landing across scattered tools, half-finished gadgets, and a mug that proudly declared "Number 1 Dad." Jonathan Hale, 38, soft-voiced, gentle-eyed, and famously polite, sipped from that mug as if the universe were calm and predictable. He hummed something from an old Earth playlist, a tune aliens never understood, though many had tried. His son, little Aaron, darted between shelves, pretending bolts were starships. The boy's laugh filled the room like a sound no empire should ever disturb. Jonathan watched him with quiet fondness. The colony was humble, a few domed homes stitched across dusty plains, but for him, this workshop and that boy were the entire reason he'd stayed on this distant rock instead of returning to Earth. The peace here felt earned. The quiet felt deserved. And humans rarely got either. Peace shattered in an instant. The workshop door burst inward, metal groaning under the force. Vargoth Dominion soldiers, towering reptilian humanoids with obsidian armor and egos twice as large, stormed inside. Their helmets glowed with scanning runes, casting eerie lines across Aaron's face as he froze mid-play. Jonathan set his mug down slowly, as though greeting unwelcome guests in his living room. "Good morning," he said pleasantly. "Can I help you gentlemen find something?" The leader, a heavily crested Vargoth with a voice like grinding rock, stepped forward. "We are collecting unregistered younglings. Your species' breeding patterns violate Dominion census standards." Jonathan blinked once, twice, then forced a smile so polite it could have been carved from ice. "My son isn't a youngling. He's a child. And he's not up for collection or trade, or whatever unfortunate euphemism your empire prefers." Aaron clung to his father's sleeve, wide-eyed but silent. Jonathan placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. The Vargoth soldiers spread around the room, knocking over tools, sniffing at human tech with arrogant curiosity. One picked up Jonathan's half-built stabilizer and announced primitive engineering, as if filing an academic report. Jonathan kept his tone friendly. "Please be careful with that. It took me 3 weeks to." The Vargoth leader silenced him with a raised claw. "The boy is coming with us. Our science division requires a human specimen with developing neural patterns." Jonathan's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. Something colder, older, and far less forgiving than the gentle facade. "Before you take another step," he murmured, "I truly hope you filled out your next-of-kin paperwork." The soldiers chuckled, assuming humans joked the way prey animals trembled. Aaron was pried from Jonathan's grasp despite the boy's quiet whimper. Jonathan didn't scream. He didn't charge. He simply watched, still as stone, memorizing every detail. Armor markings, ship ID codes, faces he would one day revisit. As the soldiers dragged Aaron out, Jonathan exhaled slowly, controlled, measured. "You're making an enormous mistake," he said softly. The Vargoth leader snorted. "Humans always assume their emotions matter." "Not emotions," Jonathan corrected, still calm. "Consequences." The soldiers vanished into the transport cruiser outside, its engines burning like a dare against the horizon. Jonathan stood in the workshop doorway long after the dust settled, long after the vibrations faded. His mug still sat on the table, steam curling from its rim as if mocking the silence. He tapped a concealed panel beside the workbench. A small holoscreen flickered to life. A single phrase blinked in military red. "Activate protocol. Mama Bear?" He pressed yes. The signal shot across subspace, quiet, coded, ancient in human military tradition. Every soldier, admiral, and covert operator knew it. It meant exactly one thing. They took a human child. Hours later, the sky cracked open as a gunship descended, thrusters flattening grass and hurling dust into swirling halos. Jonathan didn't step back. He stood at the edge of his workshop, hands clasped behind his back, posture polite even now. The gunship's ramp hissed open. Out walked General Helena Ward. Early 40s, composed, uniform immaculate, eyes carved from quiet thunder. She carried herself the way oceans move, slow, powerful, patient until provoked. And beside her, dwarfing even the gunship, lumbered two enormous Bigfoots. 9-foot mountains of muscle and fur, shoulders broad enough to block the sun, eyes glowing with the unsettling intelligence of predators who understood exactly how breakable the galaxy was. Each step they took trembled the ground. Jonathan bowed his head. "General, thank you for coming." Her expression softened fractionally. "We received your signal. I'm sorry it had to be used." One Bigfoot sniffed Jonathan's hair. The other gently picked up a fallen wrench and handed it back, a gesture both polite and terrifying. The general crouched and picked up Aaron's wooden toy ship, lying abandoned near the workshop door. She brushed dust from its tiny sails, her jaw tightening as though she'd been struck. "They took your boy," she said quietly. "They did. And they think they'll survive the week." Jonathan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Bigfoots growled, low, seismic vibrations that shook loose particles from the workshop ceiling. The general straightened, smoothing the front of her uniform, voice calm enough to frighten entire navies. "Tell me everything." Jonathan relayed the details with clinical precision. Ship markings, soldier count, the strange interest in neural patterns. The general listened without interruption, her gaze sharpening with every sentence. "They're transporting him to a Dominion war lab," she concluded. "They've been experimenting with human fear signatures. They think children produce the purest form." Jonathan's fingers curled slowly into fists. "So they want to study him." "They want to harvest him," she corrected, her voice barely more than breath. Then she added something only humans could say with lethal sincerity. "We'll bring him home." She turned toward her landing crew. "Lock down the entire region. Scanners at full range. The moment we have a trajectory, I want intercept ships deployed." "General," Jonathan said softly, "I want to be there." She met his eyes, reading the dangerous stillness inside him. "You will be." The Bigfoots rumbled in approval. A transmission crackled through the gunship speakers, Dominion chatter. Fragmented, frantic. "Human, reinforcements, impossible, anomalies detected, large, bipedal, what are those creatures?" The general clasped her hands behind her back. "Oh, they noticed the Bigfoots. Should we tell them what they are?" One of the officers asked. Jonathan shook his head. "Let them guess. It'll make the panic cook faster." Bigfoot number 1 nodded, pleased. Bigfoot number 2 flexed a bicep the size of a tree trunk. The general smiled faintly. "Prepare the pursuit coordinates. We move in 10. Jonathan remained outside as the officers rushed. His eyes traced the empty horizon, where the Vargoth ship had vanished with his only son. He breathed once, deeply, centering himself. The next breath would carry fury. But this one carried resolve. Helena stepped beside him. "You're holding yourself together well." "Falling apart later," he replied softly. "After I get him back." She looked at him with something between respect and caution. "Jonathan, when we retrieve your child, the Dominion will understand something they've ignored for far too long." "What's that?" She tilted her head toward the Bigfoots. "That humans don't fight alone." The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of departing engines, the Vargoth ship, already fleeing across the stars with its stolen cargo. Jonathan exhaled. "They think they can outrun consequences." "No," Helena murmured. "They think humans are predictable." The Bigfoot stepped forward, both staring at the sky, both sensing something the way storms sense lightning. Their fur bristled in unison. Helena's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for Jonathan. "We just found their trajectory." He turned to her, heart pounding. "Where?" She nodded toward the rising smoke trail streaking across the upper atmosphere, a faint scar against morning light. "They're taking your son," she said. "Straight into a place even they shouldn't enter." Jonathan swallowed. "And what's waiting there?" Helena's eyes gleamed with something that chilled even the Bigfoots. A secret the Dominion was never meant to discover. And the ground shook beneath them as the Bigfoots roared in unison, answering a call the galaxy had forgotten existed. The Dominion warship Crothelian tore through the upper atmosphere like a wounded predator fleeing an unseen hunter. Inside, Vargoth officers scrambled across the bridge, shouting conflicting reports, claws tapping frantically over glowing consoles. The ship's hull still trembled from the Bigfoot roar that had echoed across the plains minutes earlier, a sound none of them could categorize, let alone comprehend. Admiral Varkith, scales shimmering with irritated blue pulses, glared at his panicking crew. "Compose yourselves," he snarled. "Humans exaggerate everything. Whatever beasts they've brought are certainly exaggerated myths." Yet his tail flicked with unsettled fear. Down in the labs, technicians circled the small containment pod, where Aaron Hale sat hugging his knees. The child remained silent, refusing to answer their questions, refusing to cry. They didn't understand that his father had once told him, "Silence is a weapon when you're being watched." The more Aaron refused to react, the more anxious the Vargoth scientists became. They studied him, as if waiting for something to erupt from his tiny frame. "He's unnervingly calm," one scientist murmured. "Humans are supposed to be emotional." Another rubbed his trembling hands. "Do you think he knows something?" Aaron lifted his eyes just long enough to make the second scientist flinch. Meanwhile, the Vargoth High Council convened via hologram. Representatives from their distant sectors materialized as shifting figures of scaled authority, each more irritated than the last. Counselor Threzek scoffed. "Reports say the humans deployed. Beasts? Primitive, hairy creatures? The footage shows silhouettes too large to be credible." Another counselor chimed in. "Earthen folklore, Bigfoots, I believe they call them. Clearly invented for human entertainment." They all laughed, a rasping chorus that revealed their ignorance far more than their confidence. In their minds, nothing from Earth was ever to be taken seriously. But far below, aboard the human gunship streaking after them, General Helena Ward studied the fleeing warship with a calm so sharp it could cut through armor. She stood beside the sensor display, watching the Vargoth trajectory like a mathematician dissecting an equation. Jonathan Hale sat strapped into a seat behind her, knuckles white against the armrests, eyes unblinking as he stared at the distant stars. The ship hummed around them, crew preparing for boarding protocols. The two Bigfoots crouched at the rear of the cabin, resting on their massive haunches, their breathing deep enough to vibrate the walls. Helena broke the silence. "They're running toward a sector they consider safe." Jonathan leaned forward. "Safe for them or dangerous for us?" "Both," she answered. "Which means they're terrified." He tried to breathe evenly. "Good." One Bigfoot rumbled an approving growl. The other gently nudged Jonathan's shoulder, a surprisingly tender gesture considering its hands could crush a tank. Helena hid a small smile. It was rare to see Bigfoots show affection, rarer still for them to show it toward anyone who wasn't one of their own. "They like you," she said. "That's usually a good sign." "Usually?" Jonathan murmured. "One once adopted a Marine squad," she replied. "Wouldn't let them eat alone ever again." He almost laughed. Almost. But the thought of his son, trapped on a ship filled with creatures who saw him as data, crushed the humor back down. His voice tightened. "They mock the Bigfoots. They always mock what they don't understand. And they don't understand humans either. Not yet." She glanced at him. "But they will." Back aboard the Crothelian, chaos swelled. Engineers reported hull dents from unknown shockwaves. Pilots claimed their scanners malfunctioned after detecting massive bipedal signatures. Admiral Varkith slammed his claws onto the command table. "We are the Dominion. We do not fear forest monsters." Yet deep in his chest, fear coiled like a tightening knot. The ship's logs continued playing the field footage. Two colossal shapes emerging behind the human general, their silhouettes outlined by dust and morning light, their presence radiating ancient, predatory certainty. One technician whispered, "They moved like they recognized us." Another muttered. Their eyes glowed. "Creatures don't do that." Varkith snapped. "Enough of this superstition." But he couldn't erase the tremor in his voice. Aaron watched through the transparent panel of his containment pod, as the scientists argued. They were afraid, not of him, but of something chasing them. He pressed his palm to the barrier and whispered, barely audible, "Dad's coming." The lead scientist flinched as if struck. He spoke, he hissed. Another technician backed away. Did he threaten us? Aaron didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. Helena's gunship closed the distance with relentless speed. The stars ahead brightened as the Dominion vessel crossed into the outskirts of Sector 9, a region Helena recognized instantly. Her jaw tensed. They're heading toward the derelict research fields, she muttered. Jonathan frowned. What's there? Something the Dominion stole from us. Something they were never meant to use. Her words hung heavy, pulsing with the weight of a buried truth. One of the Bigfoots stood abruptly, sniffing the air, then tapping the hull with a rhythmic pattern as if answering a call. Helena's eyes widened. They smell the boy. Jonathan's breath hitched. They were closing in, closer than the Dominion realized. Inside the Vargoth ship, Admiral Varkith barked new orders. Prepare to accelerate. We cannot allow human forces to intercept us. But before his crew could carry them out, alarms shrieked across the bridge. Unidentified gravitational disturbance behind us, shouted a pilot. Mass signatures, enormous, 2 entities. Varkith froze. Two. The entire bridge fell silent. Helena's ship locked onto the warship's trail. Jonathan leaned close to the viewport, searching the void like he could find his son through sheer will. They think they can treat my child like a lab animal, he said quietly. They think we're soft. No, Helena said gently. They think we're civilized. He breathed out a broken laugh. They took my boy. Civilization stopped the moment they left my yard. Helena placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Then let's go remind them who humans become when pushed. One Bigfoot lurched forward, letting out a thunderous call that echoed through the entire gunship, a sound older than war and sharper than fear. Jonathan swallowed. What did he say? Helena sighed. Rough translation? Prepare their coffins. Jonathan nodded. Good. Meanwhile, the Vargoth commanders shouted over each other. The humans are pursuing. The beasts are gaining. Why are they so fast? And then the most panicked question of all. What are the humans planning? Aaron lifted his head again, sensing the shift in the air. Even as fear tugged at him, something else pushed back. Hope, fierce and bright. His father was coming. And he wasn't alone. The nearest scientist backed away when Aaron stood inside the pod. Why are you smiling? He demanded. Aaron whispered. Because you don't know what you've done. The lights flickered. Consoles flickered. The ship groaned as if something vast pressed against its hull. And far behind them, 2 enormous shadows emerged from the dark, gaining speed, gaining purpose, gaining fury. The Dominion had mocked the Bigfoots. Now the galaxy would learn why Earth never did. The Dominion warship shuddered as if some colossal hand squeezed its hull. Lights flickered in panicked rhythm. The bridge crew clawed at their consoles, trying to stabilize the trembling vessel, while alarms erupted like a choir of terrified metal. Admiral Varkith bellowed orders that no one seemed capable of following. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something unfamiliar slither beneath his scales. Something cold, tight, and suffocating. Fear. Behind the fleeing vessel, the human gunship burned through dark space in a straight, merciless line. General Helena Ward stood at the command table, a storm of quiet focus. The Bigfoots crouched behind her, their massive forms silhouetted by pulsating emergency lights. Their breath fogged the cold steel, and their eyes glowed with primal intent. Jonathan Hale watched the Dominion ship shrinking in the distance, his jaw locked, his gaze unwavering. That shrinking dot held his entire world, and every second pulled another thread from the fabric of his restraint. Closing distance, the pilot announced. They can't outrun us. They know, Helena replied. They're screaming already. They just haven't realized it out loud. Jonathan's hand tightened around the strap of his seat. Then let's turn up the volume. One Bigfoot huffed approvingly. Deep inside the Dominion vessel, in the sterile corridors of the research deck, chaos boiled. The boys' containment pod rattled with each violent lurch of the ship. Scientists scrambled for balance, arguing whether to sedate him or transfer him to a reinforced cell. Aaron sat with his small hands pressed against the transparent barrier, watching them with steady, unblinking eyes. His silence frightened them more than any weapon could. "He's just staring," one whispered. "Why isn't he crying? Human younglings cry. He knows something. He must." Aaron didn't respond. He only whispered one thing under his breath, so quiet they barely heard it. "They're coming." The scientists froze. One stepped back as though the tiny boy had sprouted claws. On the bridge, another tremor rattled the hull. A pilot shrieked, "Gravitational disturbance. Something massive is closing in." Varkith snapped, "Show me." The forward screen flickered, revealing two enormous shapes barreling toward them at impossible speed. The silhouettes were unmistakable. "Biological entities," a sensor officer croaked. "Identical to the creatures on the surface." Varkith slammed his tail in frustration. "Impossible. Beasts can't track starships." "In the human gunship," Helena murmured. "They don't track the ship. They track the boy." Jonathan whispered, "My son." The Bigfoots rose as if pulled by an unseen thread, muscles rippling beneath their fur. One pressed its massive hand against the hull, as if feeling the vibration of a heartbeat. They growled a sound that resonated like thunder through bone. Helena inclined her head. "They're ready." She turned to Jonathan. "You'll have your chance to reach him. But we go in hard. These creatures won't hesitate." "Neither will I." "Good." The Dominion vessel lurched violently as its engines faltered. The gravitational wake of the approaching Bigfoots was like a storm front in space, bending particles, warping sensors, crushing confidence. Vargoth officers shouted frantically. Shields dropping. Massive kinetic signatures approaching. They're leaping. On the forward screen, two colossal figures launched through space like meteors with legs, propelled by unknown physical force. Their immense forms slammed onto the Dominion hull with bone-cracking shockwaves. Metal groaned, twisted, screamed. The Empire finally screamed with it. Varkith staggered. "Boarding!" Through the exterior. Humans had told stories of Bigfoots. The Dominion had laughed. Now those same myths dug their claws into the ship's armor and began tearing their way inside. A deafening roar vibrated through the entire vessel, sending several crew members collapsing in terror. The hull split open as a massive hand punched through, sending shards of metal raining across the corridor. Scientists shrieked, dropping instruments. One Bigfoot's red-glowing eyes peered through the opening, and the corridor plunged into feral silence. The creature ripped the breach wider. Alarms wailed louder. Footsteps thundered as Dominion soldiers assembled, weapons shaking in their hands. They fired plasma bolts, but the Bigfoot dodged with uncanny speed for its size. It swatted soldiers aside like dust motes. Another charged down the opposite corridor, its roar rattling ceiling panels loose. Up on the bridge, Varkith demanded. "Where are security reinforcements?" "They're retreating. The beasts, they can smell them." "What does that even mean?" Jonathan didn't wait for Helena's signal. He unstrapped himself, determination eclipsing fear. The Bigfoot nearest the airlock crouched, awaiting boarding clearance. Helena met Jonathan's eyes. "Stay close. Stay focused. Just get me to my son." The human gunship's boarding lance shot forward, latching onto the Dominion hull with a metallic shriek. Doors blew open. Smoke and sparks burst out. Helena stepped through first, her voice calm but lethal. "Wardens, advance." Human Marines poured into the ship with tactical precision, moving like shadows wielding thunder. Their movements were polite death, every gesture measured, every strike calculated. The Bigfoots crashed through parallel corridors, following the scent of the boy and the fear of those who held him. Jonathan followed Helena into the Dominion's failing halls. Smoke swirled around him, lights flickered overhead, and faint tremors shook the floor. His heartbeat thundered with each step. Soldiers attempted to block their path, but were quickly disarmed or thrown aside. Down the research corridor, Aaron heard the approaching chaos. He pressed his ear to the pod. "Dad!" A scientist grabbed his instrument. We have to move him. Another tremor rocked the room. Ceiling panels collapsed. Sparks showered. The containment pod toppled. The scientists fled, abandoning their notes, their courage, their logic. Jonathan turned a corner and saw the pod lying crooked against the wall. He ran. Dad! Aaron cried. Buddy! Jonathan whispered as he tore open the emergency latch, lifting his son into his arms. He pressed his forehead to Aaron's, the relief breaking him open. I've got you. I've got you. The corridor thundered as one Bigfoot appeared, towering over them, ready to smash anything threatening. Aaron blinked up at the creature with awe. Is that real? Jonathan laughed, breath trembling. Oh, he's real. Behind them, Helena strode forward, gaze locked onto a nearby chamber glowing with sickly red light. Jonathan, she said quietly, you need to see this. He followed her into the room, still holding Aaron. The machine at the center pulsed like a wounded heart, an apparatus built from stolen human tech and Vargoth bloodlust. Tubes filled with glowing fluid connected to a central core humming with psychic energy. Aaron shivered. Jonathan tightened his hold. What is that? He asked. Helena's voice chilled. A weapon. One powered by human fear. Jonathan's breath froze. They wanted your son's terror, she continued. To fuel this. Jonathan stared at the machine, horror and fury merging into something dangerously calm. Burn it, he said softly. The Bigfoot behind him cracked its knuckles. Helena nodded. And as the machine began to overload, the Dominion's alarms reached a piercing crescendo, one final, terrified scream. Because they had just activated something far worse than the weapon they built. They had activated humanity's wrath. The Dominion warship groaned like a dying creature, its lights flickering in frantic pulses as the psychic weapon overloaded. Panels blew apart, sparks rained like burning snow, and terrified officers stumbled through corridors filled with smoke. Jonathan held Aaron tightly, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his chest, grounding him even as fury coiled through every inch of his being. The moment he'd seen the weapon designed to feed on human fear, the quiet father inside him had broken open into something colder, sharper, something the Dominion never should have provoked. General Helena Ward stepped into the center of the chamber, her coat brushing aside drifting embers. She regarded the monstrous machine with a tilted head, as though analyzing a puzzle she'd long expected to solve. Vargoth engineering, she murmured. Ambitious. Cruel. Sloppy as usual. She turned toward Jonathan. They never imagined we'd see this. Jonathan tightened his hold on Aaron. They took my son to power it. They did. Helena's eyes hardened. And now they'll learn what that mistake cost them. The psychic core pulsed violently again, sending another wave of metallic shrieks through the hull. One of the Bigfoot stepped forward, sniffing the machine with a deep growl that vibrated the floor. The creature's eyes glowed with primal understanding, and it slammed its fist into the chamber wall, cracking it like glass. Jonathan instinctively shielded Aaron, but Helena lifted a calming hand. He's not attacking, she said. He's signaling. Signaling what? Jonathan asked. That we're not alone. As if on cue, the human gunship transmitted a piercing data burst into the Dominion vessel systems. Emergency sirens glitch-screamed, panels blinked chaotically, and a hologram erupted midair in the center of the room. It displayed a massive strategic grid, a stellar map containing dozens of Vargoth military installations across multiple sectors. All of them were blinking red. Jonathan's breath caught. What is that? Helena clasped her hands behind her back with polite composure. The trap they walked into. Aaron looked at the shifting hologram with wide eyes, whispering, Dad, we're everywhere. Helena nodded. We are now. A Dominion scientist cowered behind a console, shaking so hard his claws rattled. Impossible. Our networks are encrypted. No one could access. You brought the access point aboard yourselves, Helena interrupted coolly. The boy's tracker contained a false genetic signature. A Trojan key seeded with subspace exploits. You kidnapped him, carried him straight into your secured network, and open your entire empire like a storybook. Jonathan blinked. Wait, you planned this? We prepared for this, Helena corrected. The Dominion's experiments have been on our watch list for years. We needed proof. Something they couldn't deny. They needed to make the mistake themselves. She nodded toward Aaron. And they did. Aaron buried his face in Jonathan's chest. I didn't want to be bait. Jonathan kissed the top of his head. You're not bait, buddy. You're brave. They made the mistake. The ship lurched violently as another shockwave tore through the decks. Vargoth soldiers stumbled into the chamber, weapons shaking. One pointed a trembling claw. Surrender. Humans, stand down. Helena didn't turn. She merely raised her voice slightly. Wardens. 5 Marines appeared behind her like summoned shadows, moving with the precision of a knife drawn across silk. Within seconds the soldiers' weapons clattered to the floor, and the alien officers were restrained, wide-eyed with disbelief. You're outnumbered, one hissed. Helena raised an eyebrow. You have 200 troops left on this failing ship. We brought 50 Marines and 2 Bigfoots. She tapped the hologram. And your entire empire is about to light up like a Christmas tree. Yet somehow you think you're the ones with numbers. The nearest Vargoth looked from Helena to Jonathan to the towering Bigfoot looming above him. What are you? Jonathan stepped forward, voice frighteningly calm. Parents. The psychic weapon surged with a final scream, threatening to rip itself apart. Helena pointed to the primary conduit. Disable it. One Bigfoot seized the conduit in both hands, and tore it free as though pulling up a stubborn weed. The machine sputtered, lights dying in an instant. The room plunged into dim red glow, the danger subsiding. But the trap had only just sprung. A deep thunderous vibration shuddered through the ship, a synchronized hum of engines far larger than the Dominion vessel itself. The nearest viewport cracked open enough to reveal shadows in space. Massive ones. Human dreadnoughts emerging from folded space in perfect formation, surrounding the Dominion vessel like wolves encircling a wounded predator. Jonathan whispered, When did they get here? When your son crossed the Dominion border, Helena said simply. Your distress signal authorized Operation Bring Him Home. And that operation always carries a contingency. We don't just retrieve the child. What else? Jonathan asked. Helena gave him a soft, lethal smile. We take the empire that stole him. The Dominion officers collapsed to their knees. Outside, human dreadnoughts powered their cannons, not firing, merely illuminating. Each pulse of their engines reverberated like a promise. Dominion ships in nearby sectors began broadcasting panic surrender signals. Helena pulled up a new hologram showing the entire Vargoth network collapsing in real time, their command structure dissolving like sand in a storm. This is impossible, one officer trembled. Humans are a minor species. Helena tilted her head. We said that. You assumed it. Jonathan held Aaron as the boy peeked over his shoulder. Dad, Aaron whispered, are we winning? Jonathan looked at Helena, then at the Bigfoots, then at the galaxy trembling outside the viewport. We're not winning, he said gently. We're ending it. A massive metallic groan echoed through the ship as the dreadnoughts activated docking clamps. One Bigfoot howled triumphantly, the sound vibrating through bulkheads. Helena touched her earpiece. All Dominion military cores are secured. Initiate takeover protocol. Jonathan swallowed. So, what happens to them? The same thing that happens to anyone who steals from humans. Helena's gaze sharpened. We restructure them. A faint hiss escaped the captured admiral. You tricked us. You wanted us to take the child. We wanted you to reveal your weapon, Helena replied. You added the part where you kidnapped a boy and made this personal. Jonathan stepped forward, eyes colder than vacuum. And when it's personal for humans, galaxies burn. Helena placed a steadying hand on his arm. We have your son back. Let the rest be procedure. He nodded, holding Aaron close. Then the ship shuddered again, this time from the outside. A distant boom rolled through the hull, One of the Vargoth supercarriers had just detonated after its systems refused surrender protocols. Helena exhaled. The galaxy will never mock humans again. And they will never mock Bigfoots. A shadow fell across them. One Bigfoot crouched beside Aaron, giving the boy a gentle rumbling purr. Aaron smiled for the first time since he'd been taken. Jonathan whispered, "We're going home." Helena looked toward the viewport, where human ships waited like guardians carved from starlight. "Not just home," she murmured. "We're taking everything they thought they could hide." The ship vibrated once more as clamps locked tighter. And somewhere deep in the Dominion comm channels, a single terrified broadcast echoed through every frequency. "Do not provoke Earth. They bring monsters."